The only way that you can live a fruitful life is to think that the creative spark comes from outside of you.
I have responded to his spaces with a change in behavior, and I've only realized it in later that I have changed my behavior because the space wanted me to. How do you create that?
A lot of architects think of architecture as the building, that the building is the object, but it is the life after. This idea of time.
What drove you to that style of architecture?
Getting introduced to IIM Bangalore as part of our analysis to go see it, and we'd never heard of this building before. That engagement with this work, which was sophisticated, which was sensorily very rich, brought home to me the incredible heightened sensory quality that architecture can actually trigger.
What's the general perception of Indian architecture on the global platform?
I would say that there is a lot of excitement about it.
Students from architecture of BMS department are doing a lot more better versus architects who are passed out from other colleges. Is world apart.
What does a college actually give you now that I can do a masterclass on YouTube and learn all about the history in a couple of weeks? Why would I go to college to do that? So in fact,
Sabha that you have done, there's so many art events happening, so many of these events that happen there that bring people together. So can good architecture shape the society?
I think
Creative Sparkplug is a black book of creative journeys. In this podcast, we speak with creative people like yourselves and record their stories. It gives insight into creative lives, it inspires youngsters, and it nourishes the ones feeling challenged in their creative pursuits. And that's the reason we've been doing what we've been doing. Today, we speak with somebody who doesn't need much of an introduction because he's a contemporary, and we've all, at least in a city like Bangalore, I think all of us have experienced a couple of spaces by him, architect Bijoy Ramachandran. I have a very personal thing to connect with him, although a larger description for the ones who may not have had the good fortune of experiencing his spaces. An introduction for that would be provided by Rajesh. But I connect with him from a story that I was telling him when we were chatting up before the pod, that I have responded to his spaces with a change in behavior, and I've only realized it in later that I have changed my behavior because the space wanted me to. And that for me connects with me personally, because if something that has been created by somebody, furniture, product, makes you articulatably feel something and makes you respond automatically, I think that's an inquiry I would like to do. How do you create that? There's something in that that makes you respond. That would be my inquiry into his life. Rajesh, over to you.
Yeah. So welcome on Creative Sparkplug. We're honored to have you here. I think we've been trying to connect with you for quite some time, and we personally wanted to talk to you and understand from you your journey.
By the way, we were a little intimidated 2 years ago कि Bijoy को call करें या क्या करें.
Yes, we were.
Then we started getting, we earned confidence before we reached out to him.
So today we are talking to architect Bijoy Ramachandran, co-founder of 100 Hands. He runs the practice with his wife Sunita. You are one of the most recognized contemporary architects. I think you are, to me and my generation, BV Doshi, what BV Doshi was probably for you. We always looked up to you, and I think being in college, we always had this thing that, okay, we need to come work with you, learn and understand how you do design the spaces that you do end up doing. And I think as of today, I think one of the most recognized projects, two of the most recognized projects that people are talking about in Bangalore context is one is Sabha and BIC. I think one of them, Bashop just explained, spoke about how his behavior changed when he walked into it. So we definitely want to get into the architecture side. We'll probably try and avoid too much of technicalities because we don't generally do that. We would like to know you as a person and what got you to design the way you are doing. So where did you start? Why and how architecture, or why a creative field? I learned from you now that you have a younger brother who's also into a creative space. So what got both of you into a creative space, or is it personal journeys, two separate journeys for both of you?
I would say that it's two separate journeys for both of us. Though there was a lot of art and creativity in the family, both my parents draw beautifully. My dad drew very well. My mum is always sort of creatively inclined, and so every time she gives us gifts, she will decorate the envelope and make drawings for us. And drawing was a big part of us, part of our growing up. Before the internet and before phones, during summer holidays, I remember spending long afternoons having been assigned drawings in the house, during summer vacations. And so my brother and I would just sit and draw in the afternoons, having nothing else to do. Um, but it isn't, architecture didn't come sort of, I wasn't passionate about it or had some kind of a vision that this is what I would have to do or pursue. I had a teacher in school who recommended it after having, he would counsel us in 12th standard and tell us what he thought we should be doing because he knew us, over the course of many years. And so he suggested architecture because I used to draw well. And so it's a very standard story. Though I do remember, and I've said this before many times, but during our summer breaks, I was in boarding school. My brother and I were in boarding school, and we would go to Trivandrum and then from there catch a flight to go to the Middle East because my parents were there. And in Trivandrum, invariably, every time we went, my granddad would take us to Kovalam to that amazing hotel that Charles Courier designed. And this is right from the age of 8 or, 7 or 8. And I can still remember viscerally that experience of passage through that building. So, it's a building that's set within the cliff. And so you enter actually in a very dark, in a way you're entering the cave. And then from that dark reception, you make your way out to where the pool is. And my granddad used to know the manager. And so we'd get to use the pool. We'd have fried fish on that terrace next to the pool. And it's an amazing sequence from that dark entry to this place of incredible prospect out onto the horizon. And so somehow I think maybe that subliminally stays with you, these experiences of encountering architecture like that. And then, of course, these Kerala trips would always be full of trips to incredible temples. And those also stay with you, the sounds, the smells, the sort of heightened sensory conditions of these temples. So I'm glad that my teacher told me to pursue architecture. I can't imagine having done anything else. Yeah.
Sunita and you are partners here as well.
Yes.
How does it feel like to be with somebody in this whole bandwidth of boardroom to bedroom?
Suni may have a more detailed response. I can't imagine it any other way. So first and foremost, Suni and I do very different things. And so we're not in each other's way, work-wise. Of course, I do engage with her a lot on everything that I'm doing. She has an incredibly sharp eye for proportion and detail. And so in that sense, I show her everything I'm doing and we do discuss. But it isn't, both of us never talk about architecture in that sense that we're not always discussing design or architecture. I mean, that isn't really true. And Suni doesn't have the patience for that. So so it's good. I mean, we have our own interests and we stay out of each other's way. I think that's that's the reason for the successful.
I'm curious
Yeah.
about this because on a very honest note, it is a bit difficult. That's
Yeah.
the word, tricky. And also your response has been answered in negative, in some sense that we stay out of each other's way. My inquiry would, actually, I'm double clicking on the same question in some sense. My inquiry would be, the difficulty is sharing space consistently,
Right.
right? And a personal and professional space both.
Hmm.
And I know people, like we were talking to Shiva, and Shiva was like, she does something else, I do something else. And that's a principle we have started before we got married.
Right.
Because they met before, right?
Yeah.
So, you see people take those stands, and there's some, in your case, there is a balance.
Hmm.
And it would be nice to know what creates that balance and what puts it off. Because there are both examples, people who work very well together, however they manage that, and people who've decided not to work well together. Right. So what creates that balance for you? Where do you guys converge? And what are the things that you guys say? Your territory, my territory.
I don't think we've articulated that. I mean, your question prompts me to think about it, but I haven't had that conversation with Suni in any great detail. What is it that is my domain and what is your domain? I mean, things are pretty fluid between the two of us, and I think we have the same taste and we value the same things, and we both matured as architects in a very similar environment at BMS together, and all of the things that we value are completely coming from that context. I worked in Boston with a person called Fred Cotter. And Fred Cotter and Susie Kim ran this amazing practice called Cotter, Kim and Associates. And they have a monograph, and Colin Rowe, who's a very, very famous academic, wrote the introduction to the book. And he says it beautifully, about Fred and Susie and how they work together. And he says that, Susie is the pragmatist. She's the one who enters the room and knows immediately what is of value and who are the people in the room who control things. She's able to perceive that immediately. And Fred is the romantic who kind of, what Colin says is he's an incandescent intelligence. And he just may not necessarily know how to operate in the world, but he just is bubbling with ideas. And Susie gives him the framework in which he can exist. I wouldn't say that I have that kind of intelligence, but I do struggle dealing with, the everyday negotiations that practice requires. And Suni's incredibly adept at that, at how to manage expectations, how to negotiate, how to get things. And so the practice requires both these things, this ability to deal with the real world, to make those negotiations and to get what we want happen, but also to listen to the client and make sure that we are also registering the things that, is coming back in terms of feedback. I'm happy just not dealing with any of that and just be drawing. And so, yeah, in many ways, I'm very fortunate that there is this situation in which I can exist, that I can operate, because I would not be able to operate. Yes.
Yeah, and that's a beautiful story because, the point that you make about how this balance gets created with somebody's experience, and that's reflecting on yours. Somebody who's bubbling may not know how to contain,
Right.
and somebody who's a pragmatist
Right.
knows exactly intuitively how to put a framework.
That's right.
And that balance has probably put the picture well together. And I think we must share this bit a little more with intent, because I think people struggle with it. I mean, I've struggled with it.
I have the problem. My
Yeah.
wife comes to work and I don't know the difference. I don't know how to transition between the office and
Right.
home.
Right.
And I think a lot of younger architects are also, because it's by nature that we meet at college, we work together and we end up getting married to another fellow architect.
Right.
Though my wife is not an architect, but that's what happens. And then a lot of times we don't know how to move forward and take things forward. But I think this question would
Yeah.
definitely give direction to a lot of us.
No, because there are choices that get made. Choices of saying that, we will not do things together. But what I also hear from what he's saying, in the way that he said it, is the fact that Sunita and he seem to have a unsaid mutual admiration, respect, and space for where the other person comes from. They may not have spoken it amongst themselves. And that is probably what creates the balance a lot more, right? That I know Sunita does this, and she probably feels the same. We need to talk with her to get her perspective,
Yes.
as he said. Yeah.
Yeah.
Over to you.
You mentioned that both your parents were on the creative side. What exactly did they do so that they were on the creative side?
Well, yeah. So both my mom worked for a newspaper in Dubai. She was with the Khalij Times, but she was in classifieds. I mean, she wasn't doing any design work or anything. And my dad was a marketing manager. He worked with a trading company. And so in their day jobs, it wasn't. I mean, my dad, of course, did a lot of the promotional stuff, marketing for this trading company, and so. He was always very kicked about in-store promotions and how to set all that stuff up so it gets a lot of attention. But they just, I mean, I remember this one drawing that my dad made of, my grandmom. And I can still remember, the way that he'd drawn it to get a sense of her wrinkled skin. And I mean, just this, the kind of tactility of a drawing, and these are just, I mean, both of them are not trained or haven't, I mean, it's coming out of them, this, my granddad also, my mom's dad also was a very, very, I would say that he was a very conscious, he was very conscious of his own branding, the way he dressed, the way his business card was designed. And this is all at a time when nothing existed, I mean, in terms of these terms that we use. So I think my granddad, whose picture's on my board, that he had this kind of personality of someone who's really made himself to be a certain way, worked on it, read all the books, just made something of him, of himself, creatively, as a person. So I think these things have stayed with me and with my brother. Yeah.
So your current style of architecture that you are practicing involves a lot of sensory experiences, wherein there's play of light, shadow, material, sustainability. What drove you to this style of architecture? Did something that you went through, any experience? Because generally it is either commercial viability that most of us look at, because at the end of it we all have to earn our bread and butter, but the style that you have steered yourself to and that you are practicing. And I think today in Bangalore, at least, we know a lot of people who have passed out, who have worked out of your office, who have picked up that style and moved forward. So what drove you to that style of architecture?
First, I'd say that they're not mutually exclusive, commercial viability and, and this kind of sensory quality that architecture can possess. I don't know I think the initial, I would like to say that when I was in college, in my third year, we did NASA, and Nagaraj Bastari was there at BMS at that point. He was in fifth year. And working on this one, trophy for NASA really, in a way, focused a lot of things for me. And we did an analysis of one of Sanjay Mohe's buildings, Mr. Mohe's buildings at IISc. And in doing that analysis with friends, with a very close friend called Thomas, just getting to know Mr. Mohe's building intimately, and then through that, getting introduced to IIM Bangalore, Nagaraj suggested as part of our analysis to go see it. And we'd never heard of this building before. That engagement with this work, which was sophisticated, which was sensorily very rich, and this introduction to IIM Bangalore, I think brought home to me the incredible heightened sensory quality that architecture can actually trigger. I hadn't felt that before. I wasn't conscious of it before. This Kovalam experience or the temples, etc. You have that kind of subliminally in the back of your mind. But when you do an analysis and when you're really getting into it, you start understanding these tricks not tricks, but these strategies that the architects are using to give you a heightened sense of being alive, to come into a space that has visceral quality. And so I'm always pursuing that. I think, in the office as well, of course, we don't always, get it right, but sometimes it's incredible when someone comes back with, a comment about what they felt when they entered a place or passed through it, that there was something that gave them great pleasure and heightened their senses. Architecture exists, I think, at trying to do both these things. At one point, it's a very, very sensual sort of thing that you want buildings to move you. You want buildings to give you a sense of being alive. But they are also abstract. They're also trying to talk about time in the long durée. That these buildings are markers of time. That over time, what happens to them, how they age, how people mark them with activities. That this immediate sensory quality and this long-term, idea of meaning, that great architecture does both these things. And that's why I think the Management Institute has that incredible quality of seeming to have been there since forever. And yet every time you go there, it's new. You feel you're encountering something fresh. How do buildings do that? We're trying. I mean, this is...
But that was one event that got you in the direction. But over the next couple of years, did you continue to practice the same thing to sharpen those skills? Or was it because I think you studied in BMS and then went to MIT?
Right.
And I don't know what course you did in MIT, but was it in line with something of...
No, the MIT course was mostly to do with cities. It was an urbanism course. But what was really amazing about, again, a chance encounter, that when I was graduating from MIT, my thesis advisor, Professor Julian Beinart, he introduced me to Fred Cotter, the person I mentioned earlier. And I think working at Fred's office was a very, very, it was just fortuitous that I was able to go there. Fred was completely immersed in this idea of experience about how you modulate things so that you get a certain choreographed experience in buildings. Eisenstein, the Russian film director, has this amazing essay about montage and architecture. And he talks about these ways in which you compose certain things up against other things to then either give you, this idea of meaning, or give you a reference to history. Fred was completely about that. And he was very erudite, I mean, he's one of those architects who would be able to draw plans of buildings that he really liked. And he would explain them to you about what is Cobb trying to do, or what is Kahn trying to do, what is Gehry trying to do, what are these tricks that are happening in the plan that then give you a kind of sensory trigger. So working with Fred was amazing. I mean, he was just a complete architect, someone who was completely immersed in the idea of what architecture is. So that was an amazing experience for me.
And in India, did you work with somebody before you went
I was
to
at Doshi's office for a year. Yeah, in second year, first year, we were having our geometric design exam, and it was in those days you had to draft your responses to the exam. And I remember Mr. Dubey coming in, and of course, Mr. Dubey, incredible personality, loud, and he came straight to my desk and he saw me working on my drawing and he said, "Come and see me in my office," just like that. And of course, I went and saw him, and then I worked at his office. And again, someone who taught me how to draw with intent, to represent things so that you're also telling yourself what you're trying to do. That drawing is a way of investigating. Dubey was fantastic. Um, so Mr. Dubey, and then I worked with Rajiv Katpali at Doshi's office. And there I did mostly housing work. So we were doing work for Reliance. And at Doshi's office, it was actually thinking of buildings as a kit of parts, more so than experience. Rajiv at that point was really interested in the idea that and it was based on this Aranya experience that, Doshi had done earlier, that if I was to design the staircase, a typical bedroom block, a window module, that these components could then be assembled in multiple ways to make different kinds of buildings with these bits, that were designed. So we were busy trying to decipher the way that these prototypes would be designed, but also how they would come together and what those junctions would be like and how they would, almost like a modular, So that was, Doshi's office was primarily about that.
So what was it like working with Mr. Doshi? He was actively working at office at that time? And because he's a big name in the industry, and I think the only one who's got the Pritzker Prize from India.
That's right.
So what was it like working with him?
I didn't work directly with Doshi at all. Of course, I got to know him a lot better later when we made a couple of films with him. But at Doshi's office, the big thing that was going on at Doshi's office was the diamond bourse at that time. And it was a project that everybody had heard of in India. It was the single largest commission for an architect in independent India at that point. The biggest project. And I remember Doshi's, at least, whenever he would be traveling a lot, and he would come to the office and they would pin up all the stuff for him to review. And what was incredible about Doshi is that in spite of the fact that he was traveling, he was able to quickly see potential in things, So he would look at all of these drawings and be able to pick out the things that he wants to pursue, to push, so that someone else will sort of take it on and develop, So that, I think, as a practicing architect, that's of great value, this ability to see opportunity through drawings, maybe a slip of a remark from a client that triggers an idea. Doshi was always astute about these things. He also had an amazing, model maker person called Purushottam Bhai. And Purushottam Bhai and Doshi, I would like to believe, were like brothers. They were soulmates in a way, that Purushottam Bhai would be able to get exactly what Doshi is saying. Because sometimes as an architect, you're also not sure of where you want to go with it. And he would quickly make a model and show it to Doshi and see. Doshi would be like, "Arey, you got it," So it was, Purushottam Bhai was great. I remember they were working downstairs on the concourse, and the shape of it was just not, I mean, it was just not the proportion of it and the actual curve of it. And Purushottam Bhai made this foam model and he just nails it, he's just, Doshi was so excited. So some of these things about working, I mean, Doshi's very, very intuitive as a designer. I mean, maybe not so much like Korea, who seems a lot more methodical. Doshi's way of working, at least the way I saw it, was that he was very intuitive. He was coming at it through feeling, that was his first way of approaching something. Just what does it feel like? What is it? And to not come at it in a theoretical or academic way. These impulses were very nice to see the way that he responded to things.
Did it reflect Mr. Lee Cobb's style
Very
in
much,
any way,
yeah,
or-
very much. But I'd like to think that Doshi, of course, I mean, everybody says that he took, these lessons from Cobb and I think with the school the school is a great example of this kind of melding of these two spirits, Khan and Cobb. That it has that kind of precision of Khan, but the playfulness of Cobb, that it's got these kind of. Soumitra and I were, day before yesterday, we were chatting at some dinner, and Soumitra was saying that the first visit that he made to Chandigarh was with Doshi.
Oh.
That he happened to, go to Chandigarh, and Doshi was with him on that trip. And to have Doshi take you to the High Court or to the Assembly building is quite something to imagine.
Yeah.
But then we were talking about Khan and Cobb, and I said, I always felt that maybe if I worked hard enough and if I put in enough time and I really sort of did all the riyaz, that I would be able to get to Khan. I would be able to maybe get that kind of, at least the rigor of these plans. But Cobb is just out of reach. Like, you don't know how he's doing what he's doing. It's like looking at Picasso, it's coming out of some other sort of plane that it seems completely.
It's like another spirit coming
Yeah,
into
it's
it.
just unbelievable. I mean, to encounter mill owners in Ahmedabad, it's just floors you, this building. You have no way of understanding how someone can come to that as a strategy. Anyway, yeah, sorry.
So, why, sorry?
No technical bits, or maybe
No, there's no.
it's okay.
Absolutely fine.
We are
Yeah.
not rigid on anything. We'd
Right.
love to
Yeah.
get your point on things. That's you want to ask something.
Yeah, I've always been curious about this story. There's Kabuzia, and then there's Doshi, and now we hear new names. I also hear Stapati, and Judge is a good friend of mine, and then
Right.
there's Soumitra, there is you, a few other architects. Of course, work speaks for themselves, beautiful work, amazing work, experienced. But I also look at this like a chronology, architects and their work, which is in some sense symbolic or shows our country's progression. It's a response as well, right? Like I remember I went to NIFT New Delhi, and that is Doshi.
Yeah.
I hadn't seen a space like that. I come from a small town, Jamshedpur, but I hadn't seen a space like that. So for me, the first thing was wonder, right? And then I couldn't see the box in it. But I experienced it, and I studied there, and I spent 4 years there, and all of that happened. And then Bangalore happened, and I could connect the dots in some sense as a.
Did you study at IIM Bangalore?
No. I went there for some work when I was with Dovetail.
Right.
We did have a few spaces and stuff like that.
Right.
So one side is quite evident that as architects, these people have responded to a certain context that were there in front of him. And when we speak about the Doshis or the Lakobs of the world, we look at we being influenced by them means that there is this, they have responded, and this response in its turn has created or influenced society at large. Otherwise, why should we be talking about him? So in some sense, it's a symbiotic relationship. And there's continuity of time on two planes, right? And there's evolution. That continuity of time kind of gives us this evolution, this Cobb, this Doshi, there's Soumitra, you. How is it that you, as a practicing architect, find yourself different in response from Doshi's response?
Right.
Or Cobb's response? They responded to a very different time and context.
Right.
The time and context is different completely.
Yeah. Yeah, I think at a kind of essential level, I think the big lesson from these masters that doesn't result in a sort of stylistic response is the essential condition of being present to the conditions you're dealing with. So, all of these projects, though they have very, very iconic, to use a controversial word, they're beautiful and they can be quite impressive and they can lead you to doing the same kind of work again. But I think the thing about NIFT or IIM Bangalore or Cobb's works, they're rooted in a certain response to a particular time, like you're saying. They are rooted to their context. They have this kind of engagement with the context, which is palpable. Like you go there and you understand why they exist that way. And so if one is emulating these great architects and one is emulating them at that abstract level, we're not trying to do work that looks like the work that they've already done. But we're taking those lessons of being sensitive, of being present, of really listening to our clients to try and get to the project not as a singular vision of an architect trying to make a statement, but as a collaborative exercise where you're really trying to imbibe everything that's coming at you as a creative person and trying to articulate that in the most effective way possible. And the reason why I reacted to what Rajesh had said about the commercial viability of things, at the heart of it is all of that. How do you make it viable? How do you make it so that it doesn't make people lose money? How do you get it on time? How do you make it so that it's easy to use? All of those quotidian, banal things actually are essential things that then feed the building, feed the project. With the BIC, I think that was the biggest learning for us, that we were kicking and screaming through the 7-year, duration of that project. But at the end of it, when we look back at it, we see the result of that incredibly arduous gestation of just trying to get all of the feedback from the membership, the responses, the sort of, peer reviews that we had to go through. At everything, at every step of the way, we are being questioned, are you doing the right thing? Are you doing the right thing? And as a creative person, you find that existentially problematic. Like, why are they questioning me about everything? And yet, at the end of it, you understand that that questioning isn't coming from a place of ego. It's to get the better thing out, to get the better project done. And so with the BIC, there's great pride in the fact that, it's difficult to assign authorship. It's so many of us together doing things in the best interest of the project. And it's not happened often, but with the BIC, it was just all the stars aligned. We had, great team members in the office, contractors, a client who was really invested in the idea of the BIC, that the building reflects all of those intentions behind the project. So I think it's not so much, of course, Doshi and of course, Shomitra also, to just put him on that same pedestal. I look at these people and I see their work and I'm really impressed with it and I want to do work like that. But at the end of the day, the conditions in which I'm working are very different than the conditions in which Doshi worked or Shomitra has worked or responded. And so the buildings are different because of the way that they have made those negotiations with the conditions in which they have manifested. But it's a good question because oftentimes architecture can be very, very impressive. There's this amazing, Irish architect who works in London, Neil McLaughlin, who just won the RIBA gold medal. And he talks about this problematic, this idea that all architects, a lot of architects think of architecture as the building, that the building is the object, that's what we're all trying to get to. When in fact, he talks about architecture not in terms of the end result, but he talks about it as the making on one hand, and then the gestation, not the gestation, but the life after. This idea of time, that architecture encapsulates that time, the time of making and the time after as it matures and becomes something. So once you understand that, then the object and that first set of photographs you take is meaningless in this long durée between when you've sort of worked on it and made it something and after which you hand it over and it becomes then something over time. Which is why Sabha and BIC, again, they're very, very young buildings, just hardly 10 years. BIC is 7 or 8 years old now. They don't really mark a significant amount of time. But what is satisfying about those buildings is how they've had this kind of, stewardship to become places of meaning in the city. And I don't take credit for that. It's how people, you know, do something with it. And so the moment you think like that, ego doesn't come into the picture because you're just part of this long, you happen to be there at that point, but now you're not there. This is something else. It has a different life. I don't know. I mean, long-winded response. Yeah.
Actually, no, I think this is right up what we were inquiring into. Two things. One is this whole idea of having meaning.
Yeah.
Right. I'll stop a bit in the idea of meaning itself. Like as creative people, when we do something, it has meaning at an individual independent level. I'm assuming that on your behalf.
Yes.
Is that all right?
Yes.
That it means something to you, or else
Yes.
you wouldn't have been able to put yourself in or immerse yourself in the whole creation process. When we are negotiating with the stakeholders of any situation, typically we call them clients, but not necessarily so in the case of architecture especially. We try to share this sense of meaning in that given context, right? And a lot of articulation comes from that. So I also look at them questioning to constantly come up and share the same meaning and value, if I can throw in that word as well. You are right. And I've always wondered this, that kar to diya, we've done this, and let's assume everything has gone great at the end of it and everybody's enjoying that space. And yes, after that, it's a baby left to the world. Right. It's left its nest, right? And it spread its own wings. Then you don't have control on this. Then it's got its own flight to do and its own journey. The meaning stays with you. You may have articulated it, put it out there, but the meaning changes from everybody who comes progressive from you. In the creation process, does one tend to think about how the meaning will continue to evolve? Or one says, listen, I will not be holding the reins onto it. After it is done, I'm gone. Right. I'll probably come and take a few complaints or snags or whatever and respond to it again in a different time and space. But I will not hold on to that. Somebody else will take on to the reins. Is it a part of the creation process? Is it a part of things that we get concerned about in the brief itself? Or we are making it to that time and space and hoping that somebody continues to create better meaning out of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult to anticipate how buildings accrue meaning over time. Take, for instance, the Lincoln Memorial, or the famous reflecting pool that is now in the news a lot because Trump is painting it blue. You know why? But the Lincoln Memorial sits there at its place, and it's got this large pool in front of it. And initially, it was a place to celebrate Lincoln's ideas, his fight for civil liberties. But over time, all protests have centered around the Lincoln Memorial when it comes to Black Lives Matter or whatever. Whenever there's a big protest, it happens there.
There's a symbolic.
And so now that building has become connected to this larger social movement through these relationships. And it may or may not be something that the architect would design. I mean, it's a Roman sort of, or Greek, temple, which now has become, the idea of social justice and democracy. So how buildings accrue meaning over time is difficult for an architect to, and sometimes it is to the detriment as well. I mean, like those simple buildings as Auschwitz, they're just simple buildings, they're almost barn-like buildings that have absolutely no quality. But because of the way history has appropriated them, they will be forever condemned, as places of certain meaning. And so what role does an architect play in that kind of long durée? How does time mark your buildings? But having said that, I think one of the important things as an architect is there are two, I think, in my opinion, and this is, again, going back to Kant, the idea of form and design, that on the one hand is design, and design is a response to circumstance, that you are confronted with all of these parameters of the project. You've got a budget, you've got a client, you've got a contoured site or whatever, and you're responding to it. And so it's all circumstantial. Every project presents its own conditions that you respond to. And that's meaning in a kind of maybe plebeian or more sort of, at a base level. You're coming at it and you're responding and you're creating something that is efficient and works well in that thing. But there is a higher ideal that an architect is also pursuing, and that's the idea of form. that before having been confronted with the site or the client, that as an architect or as a designer, you're constantly thinking about ways of being, that you encounter a school and you wonder what would be a nice school to be in, or you encounter a temple and you wonder what's that environment like for a temple, what do I want to feel. And these are abstract ideas of inhabitation, that you're in a space and it gives you a sense of being in a space of a certain quality. And so if I take a school, for instance, at one hand, you're responding to the program that you get from a client. But on the other hand, you're asking the question of what is it to be educated? What is it to be in a space that engenders conversation? And Khan had this great story about the man under the tree, that, a school is that, I want to create a space that's got a benign quality. It's got the wind flowing through it. It's got a shade. And it gives you a place where people can sit like the three of us. And there's no teacher and student here. It's just three people shooting the breeze. And in this conversation, something of magic can occur. And as an architect, you're just creating the possibility of that there is. And that's what IIMB for me is, these in-between things. Not so much the classrooms and the library and all of that, but it's a place where I can sit on the steps or, be under the pergola or in the garden, that I can catch a moment with the professor outside of class and ask him, what exactly were you telling us in the class, or meet a friend and then make plans to, go somewhere. That in those chance encounters is actually the real education. And the architecture engenders that idea of lingering in space to chat, and that is independent of all of these other asks that are coming from the client. And so this meaning is embedded in the search of those beginnings, in the search for what is at the heart of a project. What is it to be in a temple? What is it to be in a school? What is it to be in public space? And so in BIC, when you come in, you get a very small building, 45,000 square feet, but 50% of that building has no program. It's just stuff between program, corridors, but corridors of different dimensions, so that the quiet ones have an intimate place to sit, the more gregarious ones have places to perform, that these in-between spaces give you the possibility of just lingering. You don't have to go for an event. You can meet someone out there for a coffee, spend some time, and then leave. That this public space is free for everyone. And that's at the heart of the BIC. Right from the competition to at the end. That was, though the buildings look completely different, they're predicated on this idea of the in-between, of that liminal space between things. So meaning is, and we've seen that the BIC has appropriated this in-between stuff. That they've got book fairs going on, book readings, sari exhibitions, handicrafts, that suddenly that in-between is where the life of the BIC is on weekends, that everything is happening, which was not in the program, right? It was never in the program. So the answer to your question is you can never tell what will happen with your buildings, but that's not to say that you aren't thinking about meaning in the long durée, that what does it mean, these beginnings of things?
There's something interesting, and in my point of view, it's unfortunate that happened to NIFT New Delhi, which is, I saw the reminiscence of the waterfall from the foyer all the way down, and there was this level. So you entered at a different level, but you went down, and then the amphitheater opened up. So in some sense, there's this a curve that happens, and the institute exists on top of that. And there are these links, like vestibules, that connect different. I mean, for me, it was like, wow, what is this? How does somebody imagine something like that? And what I call unfortunate, but I also know that that's a response of time, with the stakeholders that were or are, as and how time progressed and the context itself changed. So the year that I went in, within a few months, there were lots of programs introduced with whatever intent. And I think in the next couple of years, there were lots of programs introduced as formal curriculums, which means that they required more classrooms. So one of the things that was there, and it was beautiful, is the fact that somebody could drive their car or bike inside, and there were these workshops that were inside. That's how I saw it. And all of these workshops, which are underground teaching rooms or classrooms, and these external units came out across. I was like, what did you just do?
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I can try my heart out. So I get it, like, indifferent of my point of view, there were people who were responding to very fast changing circumstance. And one might now, I will probably have to tell somebody that that is a Doshi building. Go and
Right.
see it. But they may not be able to witness it like they probably witness I am Bangalore, because uh, in the way
It's
it
been
continues to
mutilated.
look and
Yeah.
feel and get used, by and large remains consistent with IIMB till last year that I got to visit it. But NIFT may not be the same.
Right.
Even spaces, like there were these trees and this little green patch. So when I walked inside for the first time to take admission or get enrolled, I saw groups of people actually working there.
Right.
They were having discussions, they were making sketches, some of them are lying down, some of them are having lunch. So it was a picnic spot, yet a working spot, yet a discussion spot. Like, wow. I mean, later on I could articulate that. At that point of time, it was just, where am I?
But there is a general sense of insensitivity. I mean, there is a general insensitivity to how we, I mean, Doshi's buildings are much newer, but even if you go to temples and things like that, how you introduce electricity or lighting, how you introduce railings. I mean, these are all buildings that require a little bit of care, that you have to do. And this isn't only the great buildings, but whenever you're adding in the city or making extensions to things, one has to be careful. I mean, one has to be thinking about what the idea is. And I don't know if that the pace at which you're growing or that these new requirements necessarily mean that what exists has to be mutilated. I mean, what you're talking about, NIFT, is, I've seen what has happened to it, and it is a mutilation, because
Exactly.
you're not, whoever's done that hasn't been really careful about it, and in the expediency of just getting it done, has not really thought about how to do it so that it doesn't take away from what exists. And that's true across the board. I mean, when we are doing a building in the city, though the city is decrepit and falling apart, there's still things of value that one draws from, and your buildings are trying to refocus one's attention to the things that are of value in the city. And that's one of the things that the architect brings, that he
Yeah.
makes it better,
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
Like,
she
I mean,
makes it
if there's
better.
a Doshi building falling apart, I don't think so I'm being idealist when I feel that that is the, when you know that you're the person who's got the reins onto the building, or is the current stakeholder in whatever capacity, and you've been faced with the situation that, hey, the context has changed and I need to do something so that this building can continue to serve its purpose. That's a point of time I would expect somebody to call in, not a contractor but an architect who is sensitive to this, and say that, hey, the context has changed, can you take on so and so's work and extend it, so that, while I'm not trying to say that the old needs to continue, but what can you do in new so there is a well blend. And I love the fact that you use the word mutilation, because in my effort to be polite, I don't.
No, it's
What does
really
it mean to
awful.
feel?
It's just, I mean, I think it's insensitive. I think that's true across the board, that somehow we seem to, I mean, there are these dichotomies that we've somehow assumed are true. That, I mean, like Rajesh was saying, that there's the commercial viability, there's the speed, there's the urgency of things that need to be done. None of that means being insensitive. None of that means being careless. None of that means being unthinking, or, that in spite of all of the pressures that one is confronted with, you still have to find a way to do things that are meaningful and sensitive. Otherwise, I mean, nothing would exist of any value. I mean, people are operating. I mean, you mentioned George. George is one of, we really look up to George's work at Sthapati. And he's operating completely within a kind of commercial paradigm, working with clients who are requiring things very quickly, and yet finding space to do things amazingly beautifully, I mean, just, and pulling it out every single time, that everything he does has got something new about it and something clever about it, and working at a pace that is unthinkable, So I don't think it's mutually exclusive, that you have to somehow sacrifice being, doing something nice because you've been asked to do it quickly. So this thing about NIFT, I think, is just the wrong person probably handled it, or did it, or maybe there wasn't even an architect involved. I don't know. But it seems, and it's not only Doshi's work that requires that respect. I think everything requires respect, that you have to look carefully at where you are and then situate yourself and then make sure that you're furthering something that is of value there. And every place you will find that. So you have to just look a bit harder sometimes. Yeah.
Quick question on that one. I mean, I know you're a very polite guy. I'm not. or I try very hard. Actually,
I'm the one you used mutilate.
sure, I give you that. That's comforting for me. I was like, it's not intimidating to me. I can be myself. Okay, I have felt anger, I've felt frustration, and all of that. A lot of emotions. What does it make you feel personally as somebody who identifies as an architect?
I mean, to be very honest with you, and I'm not going to reflect on anybody else's work, but our own work. I mean, you guys like the BIC a lot, and you've been talking very kindly about it. But when I visit the BIC, I only see the things that we've really screwed up there, and it gives me great. It makes me feel that we have such a long way to go. That there is so much that we just haven't resolved. That it could have been handled so much better if George did it. That he would have just nailed it, or Shumitro, or I don't know, Pramod. That they would just have figured it out in a way that. And so that is maybe that's the way that one grows and one evolves. That over time you are trying to get to that one project where you just get it right. That it's got all of its details right and it feels a certain way. That there's Sabha that way for me is a lot more satisfying because the existing buildings had a certain gravitas. They have a certain quality that somehow these old buildings seem to embody without much effort. That the proportions of those buildings, the way the cadence of the windows work, the scale of that beautiful room with the pitched roof, none of that is mine, right? I mean, it's the buildings had the bones of this great elegance. And so there, it, I feel a lot more that, it's a place of great repose, that you go there and feel suddenly, Arey, now I can sit for a bit, and I can miss my next meeting and it's fine, everything will be fine. Sabag is a very, very comforting and has great quality. And a lot of it comes from the cadence and beauty of those existing buildings.
So I want to go back a little because I'm still trying to figure out what got you here. Was Amresh Anand your batchmate or senior?
No, he's much junior to me.
Much
Amresh was,
junior.
I think, I want to say maybe 3 years junior, 4 years junior to
Okay.
me. Yeah.
So my experience, this is my personal view as well. For some reason, architecture students from BMS, especially around your era when the time when you moved out, passed out from college. I don't know the year, but a lot of people have done very, very well in their career. They've all done really well, like Amresh Anand, even you, Sanjay. There's so many of them. And even Sujit Nair.
Right.
So what was it? And the same thing when it comes to RV College, even though RV College was known for being one of the best in the country for architecture. In practical life, when we come out and see students from architecture of BMS department are doing a lot more better in work, I would say. See, comparison can go into how much money each one is making, all of that. But work-wise, the quality of work that BMS students have been doing versus architects who are passed out from other colleges is world apart. So what was it, according to you, what exactly was the difference that so many good practicing architects are coming out of college, and what is it now in today's time the same thing is not happening?
So first, I'll give you the safe response, which is to say that we had a couple of really good teachers. So Mr. Dubey was there, and we were all very, very scared of him. He was exacting. He was someone who, the classic, the great teachers are not the ones who tell you everything and lay it on a plate for you on a platter for you. Dubey instigated us to search for ourselves. He made us learners in that way. Like he would pose questions, he would give us exercises that forced us to do our own research and come to the class with things that he would then review. And that was a fantastic way to go about. So BC wasn't taught that he wouldn't come and just tell you what was, in the syllabus, but he would make little exercises so that you would understand how a door frame worked or how a collapsible gate worked or whatever. And we had to draw those things out in those days. So I think Dubey was a fantastic teacher like that, someone who instigated you to pursue your own way of learning. The other person is, of course, Dinesh Verma, who taught us steel construction. And Dinesh was exactly the other way compared to Mr. Dubey. He came and told you in very precise terms the ways in which steel construction was done. And what was really inspiring about Mr. Dinesh Verma was his amazing ability to draw freehand on the board and show you these junctions. And suddenly, all of the logics of how you put steel together, gusset plates, junctions, well joints, all the sort of principles behind and the way these things will move over time. Mr. Verma's class was just a master class in understanding this through the way that he drew and explained it to us. So that's the credit to these teachers. The second more sort of controversial comment I'll make is that we actually had, apart from these teachers, we didn't really have much instruction at all. So most of the time, we would come riding to the BMS gate. At the end of the driveway, if Mr. Dubey's car was not on campus, he had a red Maruti, and you could see he would always park it at the end of the driveway. If he was not there, we'd detour from the gate and go to SLV, and we'll sit there the whole day making some plan or the other to travel somewhere or to go see some building or just shooting the breeze, go see a movie, go to Brigade Road, have, rice bowl or whatever. That it was a completely open environment. We didn't have attendance even at BMS, so you didn't even have to have mandatory attendance. And so you'd spend, and it was a yearly schedule, so we didn't have semesters as well. So you got 6 months or maybe 4-5 months of the year with absolutely no questions asked. Do whatever you want. We kind of had a loose structure. There's some history stuff going on. There's some BC going on. Dubey's taking, Mamta ma'am's taking history. And so it was very, very loosely structured. And I think for a creative course, I think what's happened now with the semester schedule and with the kind of, we want to cover all of these bases, AI and technology, and, you've got, 27, 28 credits every semester, that you have absolutely no time to either absorb any of the stuff that you're studying or have time to figure out what is of interest to you and to pursue that in the time that you're in college. And so I think that I would like to think that was the big difference with BMS at that time. And so this first 4 months, almost every year, we would spend doing NASA. And then NASA was sometime typically at the end of the year, December, Jan. And so we would just prep for NASA, invariably winning the trophy almost every year. And NASA became the focus of all of our energies, that we would travel for it. We would seek out projects that then, would be pertinent for the project that was at hand. And that in that pursuit, we learned what it was, that we were doing. So yeah, loose structure is, I think, critical, that there's enough space for just, inventing your own trajectory. And maybe a few good teachers just to sort of set things in motion.
The reason why I ask this is because, human behavior has not changed much.
Right.
It's still more or less similar. But the way we have been taught today versus probably the way you were taught back in your time in college, that's changed a lot. And my personal view is, unfortunately, it's changed for the worse. Because we're not getting the kind of people, the talent that is supposed to be. Like even something as simple as drawing with hand. Students passing out today, they don't even know. I mean, if we are drawing proportions, they're not able to visualize whether it's a 1 centimeter versus 1 meter to 1 kilometer. I still remember, I mean, we recorded with Girdhar sir,
I saw that.
and I worked with him as well.
Yeah.
Even now, we're doing some small project for him and his son-in-law. The way he draws, the way he's able to, on a piece of paper, put things together, scale, proportion, thicknesses, everything that he's able to show with his freehand, his hand sketches. Today's generation is not able to do that even with AI-generated drawings. So that lack of experience and that whole vigor and rigor, both that go through, that we went through, or at least you went through, our time was very different. But, that I think is definitely not putting out the great talent that, or the, the output is not as great as it used to be.
Well, I'm actually quite excited by a lot of young talent in the country. Contrary to what you're saying, I mean, there are a lot of young practices who are doing incredible work in the country. The only caveat with all that is that a lot of that happens only in the private realm, that these small practices and these youngsters haven't been able to get the kind of support that they may deserve. But I I think the flip of this is that in our time it was very prescribed. That you had a certain route and you took that route. You worked at Doshi's office, or you found certain ways to make your way in the profession. What's happened now is that because there's access to so much information and so much, that you can learn on your own, that what education is being questioned. Like, what exactly are you doing in college, and how do you structure that so that it's more than what you can look and learn from YouTube or wherever. And so a lot of people, youngsters particularly, are seeking their own trajectory outside of the confines of, just like we did maybe, but now the access to information is a lot more. So I would say that there are lots of really young, really exciting young practices in the country who've charted their own course. I was at, AD has released they've started a new IP called New Wave, and they're recognizing young talent, people who've had practices for less than 10 years. And apart from they celebrated, I think they awarded 25, trophies that night. We knew only 3 of them. We've not heard of any of those other young practices. And so after I came back from that event, I started looking up, all of these other people who I'd never even heard of. And the great thing about these practices is that they're not confined to this is a very, very traditional architectural office. I sit here at my table, a client will come, he will give me some work, and then I will do the work, and then I will sit and wait again. It's a very benign engagement with the world, like in a traditional architectural practice. We're not out there sort of, Whereas the young practices, so many of them are dabbling with multiple ways in which to express themselves through fashion, through product design, through architecture, through activism. They're out there in communities making projects by engaging with communities. So the nature of practice has changed, and the amount and the many things that the architect will touch to influence and change, that's also changing. That it isn't the traditional engagement with buildings or with master plans or whatever. That there is this real revolution, I think, in the way one expresses oneself creatively and how one engages with society. So I'm actually quite hopeful, and I think the real question is, what is education in the context of all these changes? Like, what does a college actually give you now? Now that I can do a masterclass on YouTube and learn all about the history in a couple of weeks, why would I go to college to do that, So in fact, it's plummeting across India and across the world. People applying for masters is plummeting. I mean, there are no takers for lots of the masters programs in India, though it's in a bad way. And I think even undergraduate education, a lot of people are questioning, why would I go to college? I mean, what is college giving me, in terms of instruction? So I think so you're right in that sense, that I think one has to start thinking about how is education going to change? And how is it going to be pertinent so that more people can benefit from it?
One more, I mean, my thoughts are all over the place, but a few things that I wanted to also understand is you had the experience of experiencing and working with somebody who's worked with Kaur, his work. I think so, a span of about 120 years, maybe.
Right.
Two younger architects who are now coming out and getting known in the architecture fraternity. What's your experience been like from, say, Lee Cobb to all the new gen architects passing out? That whole gamut of things, the changes that have happened. What's your experience on that?
There was a recent talk I think Naresh gave at Elevate, and he said we have to forget about people like Cobb and Khan, and that the world requires a new paradigm. That we are so stuck up with with these heroes that we are not able to address the challenges that we face. Having said that, keeping what Naresh is saying in mind, and I think it's true what he says, the thing that I see different about, if I was to just compare young practitioners today, even our own practice, with someone like Cobb or I don't know, even Doshi to a large extent, that there are ways of working, especially with Cobb, that are incredibly sophisticated. They're predicated on a very evolved idea of mathematics, on an evolved idea of geometry, about relationships in plans. So if you look at Cobb's, what's great about Cobb's buildings is that they exist both in terms of their essential quality, but also in the rigor with which they deal with the arithmetic of putting a plan together, the relationships of things to each other, this kind of Fibonacci relationship, that there are these dimensional modular relationships in the plan. So you're able to appreciate it both as a diagram, which is just visually appealing, but as you get into it, you're also able to appreciate it as a mathematical construct, And that's true for IIM Bangalore as well. If, Doshi's building, that of course it has a visceral quality. You go there and it feels, my God, this is an amazing place, and you're reacting to it as an artistic artifact. But if you take that plan and lay out the plan, or you take an elevation and lay out the elevation, everything is modular. They're all related to the other in terms of certain relationships, in terms of arithmetic. So that's amazing. It's like a piece of music, right? You're writing this music, it's got an arithmetic base to it, and yet it has this kind of sensual impact, and maybe that's why it has that sensual impact. Whereas the things that I'm doing, or the things that I see very few architects who are working with that kind of rigor to cross these two conditions of the sensual and the sort of really technical, if you will. That I don't do anything like that at that scale. I mean, we do follow some kind of grid and proportion, but Cobb was operating at a different level. So that kind of education, this understanding, and Fred was like that as well. He would know these plans in terms of their dimensions, that he'd be able to tell you, the relationship of the big hall in Senatsalo in Alto's building, the main hall where you sit versus the small communal halls, that there is a arithmetic proportional relationship between these things. Or in Utson's in the opera house, that the big hall and the small hall have an arithmetic relationship to each other, It's not just a diagram, someone's not just made a sketch and then let it there, that they're predicated on an understanding of arithmetic. And at the heart of arithmetic is the idea of proportion, that if you got your numbers right and if their relationships were right, that you would get proportion, We do it in a much more sort of, we're coming at it much more in an intuitive way. We make the model, we tweak it a bit, make sure that, it looks fine, and then we go with it. Whereas I think Cobb and Khan, to a certain extent, were all working with this idea of arithmetic, and that's missing now. So we don't have that.
And in the new age architects, what do you?
Well, I'd like to name, I think, maybe a couple of people. So I'm very, very fond of Avinash Ankalge and Harshit Naik, who run a practice called A Threshold. I think they're fantastic architects. And the thing about Avinash, at least, is that all of the work that he's doing is hinged on his awareness of precedent, his awareness of history. And so in a way, Avinash encapsulates what Eliot talks about. Eliot says, what is the traditional writer? What is the creative pursuit? The creative pursuit is an understanding of history, an understanding of the idiom, of the canon, that here are all of the things that have been done in the past, and I'm trying to get to them so that I understand how they're put together. And the second is an understanding of our zeitgeist, of this moment in time. And the great creative person brings both these things to bear. He brings this understanding of history to reflect on a condition that is contemporary. And I think to a large extent, someone like Avinash, who's so young, is able to bring to bear his great understanding of history to a contemporary moment. And so I find his work really compelling, because somehow when you visit some of the buildings, you get a sense that steeped in this building is all of that time spent in the sun drawing the old forts or the old palaces, that somehow he's been able to distill the quality of that, intense engagement. So I think there are, and Avinash isn't alone. I mean, there are lots of young young architects who've spent time traveling to see and to learn and then bring to their practice this understanding of history, which I think is crucial.
In Indian context, as far as architecture is concerned, you're a well-known name. and I'm sure globally as well. You represent India on a global platform as well. What's the general perception of Indian architecture on the global platform?
But I haven't really done much outside of India. But of late, I think both, Threshold has just won the Emerging Practices Award from the Architectural Review, which is probably the biggest award for a young practice across the world. And then Pooja Kherner from Nashik has just won the W Award again from the review. So there is momentum. I mean, there are, and of course, Vinod Daniel is very well known abroad, Anupama Kundu. These are all people who are relatively younger, who are making a real mark internationally. Yeah, I think there is a fair bit of momentum. There is a fair bit of recognition. The only challenge with a lot of this is that some of the Indian work that is getting recognized abroad tends to be of a certain type, that it has to be exotic in some sense, and so that trap, I think the names that I've mentioned so far, they've been escaping that trap, but there are practices who are getting recognition abroad, who are playing to the gallery in a way, making exotic looking work with certain kinds of materials, photographed a certain way, that with camels or with people sweeping the floor. I mean, there's this kind of exoticism, this Orientalism about these buildings that then the West really laps up, because they don't. So
That's on the award side and
Yeah.
all of that. But when you are personally meeting architects
Yeah.
on outside of India,
yeah.
or even when global architects come to India for so many of the
Yes.
conventions and meets that happen, what's the general talk that is there about Indian architecture and architects in general?
So I don't know if you've heard of Latitude. Latitude is the IIA's Karnataka's biannual. I think they do it every 2 years event. And I've been very fortunate, thanks to Rakesh and the gang at IIA, to be the tour guide. So everybody arrives like 3 days earlier, and I'm the tour guide. I take the group out to see work across the city. And so I curate 3 days. I'm driving them around, and usually it's like 4 of us or 5 of us in the car. And so Peter Rich was there once with me, and there were a bunch of them who had come. And then last time they had Latitude, Jeremy Smith, who's from New Zealand, was in the car with us. And Jeremy Smith, after going back, we had an amazing time together. And he's very, very he's got a cutting wit, but he's also incredibly observant. And so when he went back to New Zealand, he wrote a lovely essay about these 3 days. His experience of seeing work in India. I think there's a real excitement about the Indian work, at least the ones that, I showed them here, including IIM Bangalore, that this work seems to be rooted, and it's a bit more, it seems to be untouched by the fashions of the day, that this is work that seems in a way truer, if you will, that it works with construction and material in a way that predates technology and it's kind of harking back to a more primordial or a more experiential quality. So I think there is an excitement about Indian work abroad, even with these people who I take around the city to see work. And Bangalore is really blessed with some amazing people, with younger practitioners like Avinash and Pramod, and George, of course, will also be in that category, a younger practitioner. But there's also fantastic, people like Mohe or, Shumitro, Flying Elephant, who I really like.
Rajesh Ranganath.
Yeah, Rajesh. I mean, just really sorted, solid architecture, So usually we take people to that Podar house that Rajesh designed, or, we've been trying to get people to go to that Divya Shakti, that school that he designed as well. That his plans are really organized in an incredibly sophisticated way, and they're just right, I would say that there is a lot of excitement about it. I don't know. I mean, it's a very general answer, but
Yeah, taking this forward, I had a couple of sidestep questions which will come as they come. We've spoken about architecture, society at large, having a symbiotic relationship, and time being a graph in which we kind of do markers. One of the things that I would like to inquire is, he started the topic, and I think you also touched upon it, is the fact that whether we like it or not, or whether it has been an act of volition per se or not, we end up representing our craft, right? And if for certain reasons we are seen as people doing good work, then that kind of becomes exponential identity. People expect us to represent not only our craft, but as an architect, the space that we come from, the kind of what about that craft becomes symbolic to us and things like that. Like Doshi, Cobb, Khan, we speak about all these people because they represent something.
Right.
Likewise, at this point of time, in your WIP practice, because you're contemporary from that point of view, that seems to be happening. It's an opinion, but that seems to be happening as well. In all of this, a big part of this identity is the region that we represent. So and so is a Swedish architect. So and so is, yeah, and you, from that point of view, you're an Indian architect. And everybody who's represented India from that point of view, even people who are not Indian, Bawa for that matter, I know Stapati is influenced by Bawa, or at least George is influenced by him in a good way. How has this idiom call it identity of India or in Indian design, evolved over time, and where do you see it morphing? It's always morphing. I don't think so there is a fixed identity. I don't agree with the paisley and the elephant and the peacock. I mean, that's like done
Right.
dead.
Right.
The symbols, sure. But there's just so much to it in a subcontinent, right? Though she represented some front of it, Corbusier represented some. There are too many to speak about. What do you... actually, there are two parts to this question. One is, how have you seen this idiom evolve? And how are you influencing this idiom called Indian identity and Indian design?
Many years ago, as part of some magazine, Prem Chandavarkar had written this lovely essay called "The Background in Bangalore," and his hypothesis is that, and he was comparing practice in Bangalore to practice in places like Ahmedabad, Delhi, and Bombay, and forever that triangle, Ahmedabad, Delhi, Bombay, has been the center of the Indian idiom in a way, architecturally speaking. Chandigarh to some extent, but really Ahmedabad, Delhi, and Bombay. And so anything of interest, that's where you go. And a lot of architects from those regions were preoccupied with the idea of the Indianness of things. What is the Indian identity? How do I represent it in my work? There's this national agenda that I need to somehow capitalize. Now that we're post-independent, we have to make a statement. And people have had these various interesting excursions on that route. So Doshi had his time, doing a bit more sort of articulated. I mean, even in IIM Bangalore, you can go and see that library is a bit of an aberration compared to the rest of the building. It's got this kind of, it's beautiful. It's embellished. Suddenly you're like, Arey, where did this brown granite come from, And Korea, of course, famously, had that whole excursion out towards in Jawahar Kala Kendra. These buildings that are kind of visually and obviously sort of drawing from source, the elephant paisley model, that it will show you, it will embody a certain visual character. What Prem said in the piece is that in Bangalore, we've had a very, very different trajectory altogether. And he has this amazing, lovely phrase, he says, it's the palpability of place. That we, at least a lot of architects from his generation, his dad included, that they weren't interested so much in this national agenda or this national, what is Indianness. They were, on the contrary, interested in the particularities of place, that I'm operating here in Bangalore on this site with this client, and that the palpability of that is what informs the project. And if I was to do that well, if I was to address that wholeheartedly, that I would maybe then tap into something that is universal. And that's, I mean, a lot of artists talk about that as well. They're not going for the big move. They're going for what is deep within them. And in that search for what is deep within them, they tap into something that is universal. And so he talks about, and this is all the base group, Kanade brothers, Prem Chandavarkar, Sanjay Mohe, Sharad Padalkar, Nikhil Arni, this Edgar de Mello, this group of people who, when we were students, they were conducting these workshops as part of BASE. And the workshops were completely focused on this notion of place, on the notion of context, on the ability to register the particular conditions of a site, and through the sensitive addressal of those things, come to something that may have universal value. So I think we, as a firm, though I appreciate your very kind words about this kind of national prominence, we are not looking at our work to try and epitomize what maybe an Indian way to do things. Um, we are very much rooted in this idea of being aware of what we are confronted with at a very, very local level. And in that negotiation to find something. So I'd like to believe that some of these projects have transcended this local condition and have value above and beyond where they're located. But we haven't come at it that way. We haven't come at it from that kind of general condition. Samip Padora, the wonderful architect from Bombay, has this lovely lecture called "Is There an Indian Way of Thinking?" And it's based on that Ramanujan's essay, and he says uh, that question can be articulated in 15 different ways depending on where you put the stress in that sentence. And that's Indianness, that each of us will bring to the argument our own point of view. And like Amartya Sen says, and then we will have a forever argument about it. Your opinion versus my opinion versus, and where is the emphasis? Is there an Indian way of thinking? Is there an Indian way of thinking? So you can put your stress where you want on that sentence and get a different response for what that sentence is provoking, what that question is provoking. So I think that's a really pertinent way to think of this Indian thing, that it is, and we should celebrate the fact that every architect here is doing his own damn thing, and it's fine. And in that mess, maybe, like Rushdie also says, newness comes from that kurma, from that melange. That newness doesn't emerge out of a void. It has to come from that khichdi only, that everything put together and suddenly something magical is suddenly appearing, Yeah.
It is interesting you said that everybody is doing their own thing, and that does not mean that there is no Indianness to it.
Right.
It's still Indian. And we've been looking at actually idioms that explain different takes on this whole idea of what is Indian or should there be at all. Right. One of the things that I think we keep on discussing is it can never be a fixed thing.
Right.
Because we as a culture, region, as a subcontinent, we're just so diverse. It's 100 countries in one. But is it possible to frame an idiom?
We need someone like Kenneth Frampton, or I don't know, some great theoretician to wrap it all up in a way that makes sense. I don't know how to do it.
I'll give you a bad example, actually. I was speaking with my friend a couple of days back, and he lives to travel. And his father is one of my inspirations in my life. And he traveled after retirement. He traveled more than 120 countries and territories. And he used to write for Lonely Planet. And so this predates internet, the way we know it.
Right.
So he actually used to go from hotel to hotel, taking down their budgets on kind of rooms and at what corner it was. And those are and he became a travel writer as well. Wrote brilliantly. But there was something interesting that he was saying about food. Because he was a chef prior to this. It was like when I tried out Mediterranean cuisine for the first time, I could literally pick out the ingredients and I could feel the taste in it. Right? Even the garnishing or the flavors. And when you come and see Indian food, it is rather difficult to pull out one thing to the other.
Yeah.
Also, not only do our curries come in mixed with multiple things where there is an identity to the dish that it is, but the independent individual identity might be lost. And as in how he was narrating, it was a fascinating story in my mind. Right. But that does not mean that avial, which to the Western world would be mixed veg, is not different, completely different from shukto.
Right.
Or a labra, or a chachuri, or a mixed veg, or a jalfrezi that we have up north. They're all mixed vegetables off season, put together in a certain form. And he was like, see, there is mixed veg everywhere, but it's got its own totally identity.
Right. Yeah.
But to the outside world, it's Indian.
Right.
Curry,
yeah.
I saw two layers to this. One, the fact that maybe it's almost like a metaphor in my mind. As people also, we are similar. That when we get blended into this curry, we lose our identity. We are still there as being, or carrot or whatever it is, but our identity is diluted. The overall identity is more important in some sense. But at the same time, regionally, there is so much distinction and it's distinct, right? So here, I'm essentially saying that I see two things. Something gives us away, wherein we get identified as this is Indian. Yet we are so distinct every 150 kilometers away.
What is that distinction?
And I don't know whether we can put it in a framework, but will the framework have layers, or can we question this? I'll give you an example. There's this frame behind you, and I find this very fascinating, and it's there in my house as well. This is an architect's work. There is composition, there is placement, there is a perfect right angle frame. There is a rather there is a very traditional picture there.
Right.
Of course, it's of a deity, so there is heritage, culture, all of that, and there is precision in that. There is science in that. There is poetry in that. All of that. But there is something that we do which is very distinct. Somebody's put a tika there.
Right.
And that tika itself has so many layers to it, right? And you can't take that away. You don't have a problem with it.
Right.
But to probably a Westerner or a Scandinavian, it'll be like, how did that come in there? Where does that fit in?
Right.
But it's so much a part of who we are.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
So is that Indian? Absolutely.
Yeah, that's
How
right.
do I put an idiom to it? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'll see it in Bengal, you'll see it in Orissa, you'll see it in Kerala, wherever it is. So
That's
I do
true.
believe, as a feeling, I do feel that if I can identify that, and the world will identify that as something very Indian to do.
Right.
But yet, because of a diversity, we haven't been able to find an idiom to it. And I'm constantly being in quest of that. I don't know. I'm leaving you with this. I'm speaking more than you. It's
No,
your
I'm
call.
I'm thinking about it as well. I'm not really sure how to articulate. I mean, when we did the Mohe building, for the NASA trophy years ago, this was the question of the NASA trophy. What is Indianness? And can you find a building that then encapsulates Indianness? And Doshi, I remember in the film, says, that Indian plan is not centric, that it's not axial. So if I compare the two buildings, IIM Ahmedabad and IIM Bangalore, IIM Ahmedabad is centered on a Jeffersonian idea of a campus plan. It's got a big campus mall in the middle. At the head of the mall is the library. On one side of the mall, all the faculty stay, and on the right side of the mall are the classrooms and then the housing. And it's organized in a very, very clear sort of diagram. Whereas IIM Bangalore, is impossible to make a diagram like that because it's a rambling mess in a way. It's a labyrinth. Yeah. And so some matter very, very, to simplify things very, very dramatically, is to say that maybe that's this notion of, what you're talking about, this kind of the indeterminate quality of the Indian plan, that the plan has a certain, I don't know, I'm riffing now off of your comments. I don't know. It's tough to say.
Yeah. But we still have some identity which is visible, yes, and yet
Yes,
we
that's
can't
right.
articulate it.
That's
I mean,
right.
what is that?
Yeah.
That is being Indian.
That's right.
You can't put a
I was just
region also.
noticing now there are dots everywhere. Yeah.
It's not a misfit or
Yeah.
ISO.
Not even notice that you've done it.
And even when you were to go and settle somewhere else, you will continue with that.
Right. That's
Your
right.
motive would change, but you will continue with that.
Yeah, it's your link. Yes.
And there are variations in that. Sometimes there's Chandan, like,
Yeah, that's right.
right? And sometimes there's these three things, but we
It's
just
ash sometimes. Yeah. Right.
Vibhuti.
Yeah.
So we've been in quest of that, of this whole idea that is it possible at all? I mean, and I don't know whether there's a bias of always quantifying idiom in such crispness that it almost becomes a tagline or a mandate to an identity until there is a revolution that questions it and topples it over. But maybe your identity is constantly fleeting with a flair that is consistent.
That's right. Yeah.
And I see the same thing. I mean, if I have to look at Pramod's work as well, and I look at your studio, it's not that my eyes are not looking at things or catching things. There is an overlap, but there's distinction. He's different and you're different. And that's exciting to me in some sense, that there's influence that you can catch, but there is
But then your
identity
own person as well.
yeah,
Yes.
there's like two interwoven layers,
Right.
constantly evolving and woven
That's
in
right.
their own.
Yeah, but Pramod already, I mean, he joined the studio right after graduating and he hit the ground running. I mean, he already knew what, I mean, and this is, he came from BIT, which is a college again like BMS, which didn't really have sophisticated instruction or, a kind of, but somehow, a lot of people from BIT, from his class, actually, there's Koshi, and, there are people who've just found ways to, they found their way in the world, just on their own steam. I mean, Pramod has been, and I mean, yeah, he already knew. He had a great thesis. I don't know if you've seen his thesis.
Yeah, I've not
Yeah.
seen.
I recently attended something that mentioned you, apart from narration, about 20 odd architects from the city. Tall stories by Nayak,
Kiran.
Kiran Nayak,
Okay.
where the question I think he had posed to you was, how do you see Bangalore 50 years
Yes,
from
yes.
now? I thought that was a brilliant perspective from the point that sometimes a question becomes easier to answer if we project it into the future and have a more of vision than something that I need to execute right now and we are late for it.
In fact, I have something similar to ask in context to what you're saying. 50 years from now, that was for probably Bangalore city. But when you're designing, let's say Sabha, for example, when you were designing, did you anticipate the use and the shape and age and everything after 50 years of the building? Is that something that you think of while you're designing?
The big lesson from Sabha is the resilience of that building. Because a lot of the things that we've used in that building, actually, we salvaged from the building itself. So a lot of the timber that we removed to replace with new timber was used to make the windows and some of the rafters for the cafe roof. A lot of the flooring we pulled out of the ground to do new flooring and to do some underfloor drainage. All of that flooring we reused to line all of the corridors, etc. And so inherent in those materials is a robustness that then means that it will have another 50 years of life. So that building is self-rejuvenating in a way, And so the lesson for us in that, and of course it comes at a great cost, and we had a great client, Mr. Ravichandran, who, footed the bills and paid for all of it and is kind of visionary client. But he committed to doing all of the new additions in the tradition of the old, in terms of the materiality. So we've used the same kind of timber, the same kind of flooring, robust materials that we hope will give the building another 100 years. And when after 100 years someone comes to renovate it again, they can reuse these materials that we've used because they have inherent in them the same qualities of longevity. Yeah, so in terms of use, I think, Basho had already asked me this thing about can you project how things may be used over time, and it's difficult to tell. In fact, for BIC, we've made a series of these drawings, where so many things have happened in the BIC which we never anticipated in the common areas, like these handicraft fairs, or we've had book readings. We've even had a musical performance, a dance across the building, which we would have never anticipated that anybody would do. And so it's nice to so we've drawn all that up so that we know how much space some of these things need, so that next time we do another BIC, be better prepared for events that may happen in places that have no labels. Um, Sabha is very flexible. I mean, that's the other thing about these older buildings, especially the big sloping roof hall. Just the proportion of it, how wide it is, how long it is, how tall it is. You can imagine that space can accommodate anything, that it could be a performance venue, you could have a fashion show there, you can have installations for art, you can have instruction. So it's just a really wonderful, well-proportioned space to do multiple things.
We spoke about old and new, and we're also talking about Sabha.
Right.
In the past, I've come across works of Norman Foster, Fupi Melblau, where they've taken an old heritage building and plonked a new part, which is complete glass,
Right.
of completely new technology, and saying that they're trying to juxtapose old and new.
Right.
What's your thought on those kind of approach versus what you have done in Sabha, where completely new identities
Right.
plonked onto an old identity?
So when Zumthor had come here, in 24, I think, and I had asked him about the Columba Museum. So the Columba Museum is really, it's an old, I think it was a basilica. It's an old church. And then on top of the church, Zumthor has built the enclosure of this new museum, which is made out of a brick very similar to the old brick. But unlike what you're saying about Forster or Himmelblau, for instance, Zumthor isn't trying to make an oppositional condition. And he said that his answer is very matter of fact. He says, everybody said that maybe I should do something that is oppositional, that is glass and steel, etc. And I find that very boring, Zumthor said. And I wanted to just, like the basilica itself was layer upon layer upon layer, one on top of the others. If you scrape Sabha's plaster, you will find the trace of history in multiple layers. Of course, we've removed everything, but as you removed the plaster, you realized that in 1850 or something, there was this, and then there's this, there's this, there's this. It's just a thick layer of plaster that over years has been applied onto this building. And so Zumthor was interested in that his was just going to be another layer plonked right onto the existing building. And with Sabha, I feel that that's what we've done, that we've just added to it, but it feels like okay, here's one more version of this building without it being too dramatic and without it calling attention to itself, that it's just extended its logic a little bit. So that cafe, the utility building on the left, etc., this is all in a way subservient to the main buildings, but having little tricks of its own in terms of embellishment and detail, but not really overtly oppositional like the Forster or Himmelblau examples you've cited. There are multiple ways to do it. I mean, like Shoumitro's Cinnamon is a beautiful example. Again, a very understated alterations job, but there also the way that the metalwork has been done, the way that it's been introduced, it's just so sophisticated that it doesn't call attention to itself, but if you're looking for it, there it is, the modern thing.
So no approach is right or wrong.
Yeah, I think it depends on the building and depends on your mood, I guess, as a designer.
When you're designing, you're already imagined
Yes.
what something is going to be it's not that we design with an end result in mind, but it gets developed over time. And when we put in so much of effort as an architect designing that, we would want a team also to execute it to that level. And in today's time where the skill of masons and skill of carpenters and all of that is deteriorating, unfortunately, how do you select a team to work on? Is it something that you put in effort to select a team, what criteria you look at, or how does that happen?
I mean, over the years now, we've been in practice for 23 years now, 22, 23 years now. And we've figured out a few people who we repeatedly go back to work with. So, I mean, that's probably the simplest answer, that you know a good stone layer, you know a good mason, and sometimes a good general contractor who has a good team. And you try to get them to work on projects with you. I mean, we've had some great experiences and not so great experiences as well. I mean, we did this house in Nandi Hills with a wonderful contractor called Prakash. Now, Prakash he works slowly, he works deliberately, it takes a long time, but he's self-propelled. And you want a contractor like that, who is not doing it for you. He's not doing it for the client. He's doing it for himself. So there's a story about Prakash. I was driving to site one day, and the main living room has a ribbed ceiling. And so as I was driving, and you can see the living room from a distance because it's a double height volume. And I saw the shuttering, and I noticed that the shuttering was flat. And I started getting anxious. I thought maybe he's not seen the drawing, or, he's missed the detail. And what about the ribbed slab? So I drove into the thing, and there was nobody at site. And I saw that it was all just a flat, shuttering plate. They hadn't poured the concrete yet. I didn't go up to the roof. And I called Prakash, and I said, Prakash, didn't you see the drawing? I mean, we have a ribbed slab here, and this is, what have you done? So he said, no, sir, the ribbed slab is inside. To make sure that I get the level, I've put another layer of shuttering below to support this ribbed shuttering. Nobody's asked him to do it. He himself, at his cost, with no additional money, has, done this on his own. And so that really, you then feel that you're in the hands of someone who really knows what he's doing and is doing it on his own terms. He's not doing it for me or, for the client. He's not trying to impress anyone. He's not even telling anyone that he's doing it. So that it's unusual, but I mean, there are people like that, that then over time you want to keep working with somebody like that. He will call from site and he said, I think you should come to site because he's done some amazing brickwork or something, and he's like, what do you think? And I'm like, Prakash, it's great. Yeah. So I mean, there are lots. And Ramesh Babu, who did BIC, is another good contractor who's become very busy now. And so sometimes things get slipped. But the BIC was a labor of love for him. He must have lost a lot of money on it. But he brought a fantastic flooring guy there. He brought a great mason, Venkatesh, who did all that brickwork. So some of these contractors, they drive us as well. They push us to also then come to the table. With
So, but also, let's say a contractor has done a good job in one project, another project, and then
Yeah.
life happens.
Yes.
People move out.
Yeah.
There's a new team comes in. How does that consistency
Yeah.
and the trust factor continue? Because
Well.
anything can happen to anybody, and
Yeah, that's true. It happens in our office as well. People stay for maybe 2 years and then they're gone. And my client's like, where's that architect? She was so good. And like, you only have me, Yeah, I'm the last one standing. Yeah, but that's true. I mean, supervisors change often, and sometimes you do get stuck with somebody who may not be as good as the previous one. It is a challenge, though. I mean, I understand your question. Workmanship is a big challenge in India. I would also like to say that if I compare my earlier projects to the ones that we're doing now, our work has become simpler just because of that. That we are less ambitious, and the quality of workmanship has tempered our ambitions in a way. That we are now seeking more elemental conditions where the structure is sort of trying to play the game of articulating, so that if you get the structure right, you have the quality that you're after, and that there's no embellishment required apart from that. So that way, we are after something a bit more elemental rather than embellished. And that may be a reflection on our challenges with workmen in India. Yes.
but also because there's a lot of traditional forms of construction that you're using, even the flooring that you've done here, and I'm sure this gets repeated in most of the projects as well. Getting that skill for that kind of work is definitely going out of the window. And unfortunately, there's no institution that is
Right.
looking at it, training them back. So how do we change this thing? Because I think a lot of architects are practicing, like even Bijoy Jain from Bombay, he has his own team, but then if life happens to the team, then there's nothing that can be done. And training them again from scratch is a big deal for all of us. So how can something like this be taken forward and moved forward with?
I don't know. I mean, with Sabha, we had a fantastic contractor, a restorer, I should say, Nilesh Thakkar, who's from Bombay. And I mean, he was generous enough to allow us to do this. But we had an amazing architect here, a person called Sanjana Pandey, who ran Sabha, who was the person in charge. And Sanjana, along with a bunch of these interns, our intrepid interns, they've made these amazing videos of all of the processes at Sabha. Of course, we asked Nilesh if he was okay with it. So the mixing of the lime, the making of the cement skirt, the stonework, the replacement of a lot of the timber, the repair of the Madras terrace roof. All of this is on YouTube on videos, which I'll send you. But this is one way of saying that this is all we did here in this project, and these are skills that are fast disappearing. Here are some videos that show you how we did all this stuff. Not we, but how Nilesh and his team did. And maybe that's something that hopefully will be of some use, that maybe someone will be able to, another architect may be able to see those videos and maybe push a contractor to sort of follow those. And so very specific information about the mixes for, various kinds of plasters, mortars, so that you get a certain kind of binding strength, etc. But you're right. I mean, if you just go by statistics, the number of people applying for civil engineering in colleges is almost zero now,
Oh.
Nobody wants to do civil engineering. Nobody wants to be out in the sun supervising projects. Everybody wants to have a cushy job somewhere in the office. This is just the nature of, the way things are. So it's very difficult for people to find engineers. You can ask any contractor Like to get a young engineer to be a site supervisor, it's impossible to
Very
get
difficult.
somebody now,
Yeah.
I don't know what the fix is for that. You have to find another guest to give you those answers. Your Indianness question and this, how do we fix our labor problems? Yeah.
I have a question about two things. I look at architects and architecture as a profession where I think it's a very distinct profession from materiality point of view as well.
Hmm.
The number of materials. So, firstly, it's a bit of a baggage as well. I feel that architects are a little like IAS officers, the jack of all trades. Like 5 years, they have to learn everything. How does the structure hold? How can you manipulate that? What material goes where? I mean, come on.
Services, yeah.
There's geography, there is laws, there is limitations, there is terrain, I mean, what have you? Everything together and then,
After all that, Vastu come.
sure. So I'm essentially saying that even 5 years is too short to kind of have expertise in one, except for the expertise to be able to say that, hey,
Yeah, they're
you have,
generalist. Yeah.
so that way you're an IAS officer, or an analogy is an IAS officer where, he's a jack of all trades. Put him in anything. You put him in treasury, he'll take care. You put him in admin, he'll take care. You put him in legality, he'll take care. That's what he's trained to do, right? Which also brings an architect to a place wherein he is exploring materiality very naturally, right? And Indian subcontinent from that point of view is diverse. Like that too, every 150 kilometers, the greenery has changed, the terrain has changed, the weather has changed, and you got to play with that
Right.
context at that point of time. A lot of, so if I go back 150 years ago, I'm just throwing a number in the past. Architecture was a response even then of requirement or functionality, but the geography and what was available there kind of played a very high role in that, except for a few iconic places probably, or iconic structures. Today we stay in a place where the same material is available Kashmir to Kanyakumari, right? So it kind of pulls the rug from that understanding or the nuance of that understanding. Also, a lot of the materials used is taking away from what is naturally available to us. Prices go haywire.
Right.
There are things that are unavailable, right? How has architecture responded to materials becoming dearth? Also, materials that were not available being available in regions where they don't grow or come from. And the fact that there is history, tradition, heritage, and beauty and reason to use materials that come from there.
Right.
It's like three things that have happened all at the same time. Kerala building is a Kerala building because it is made in Kerala.
Right. With materials available there. Yeah.
But today, when I go to Kochi and see the city, the new buildings that are coming up there is using what we use in Bangalore.
Or in Germany, or in Frankfurt. Anywhere.
Sure. Yeah. So in some sense, it's three questions, but in some, the umbrella question is, as a response, how is this shifting, and how would you respond to that?
Yeah, the economics of what materials one will use has changed dramatically. I mean, I remember this story that a British architect once told me that they were working in Portland, and Portland is very famous for Portland stone, which is used in cement and all that. So the Portland stone quarry was very close to their site. And so they thought, great, we'll use Portland stone in our building, because the quarry is right there. But when they did the arithmetic to get the Portland stone from that quarry, which was next to their site, it was more expensive than getting Portland stone sent to Brazil, finished in Brazil, and sent back to another distributor, and then brought from there to their site. So there's something warped about the way the economics of manufacturing, of finishing, of labor. There's some strange equation that kind of makes something that should be obviously cheaper more expensive than what is coming from China or wherever else, So I don't know the answer to, how that, what the economics and what the labor situation. I mean, I have a general idea, but it is warped and it seems contrary to understanding, to logic. We do try to use material that is closer at hand. When we started our practice, we did a whole bunch of buildings in Tamil Nadu after the tsunami. these Hope Foundation buildings. And the thing that was critical for those buildings is that we had no money at all. It was a 500 rupee a square foot kind of, budget. So there's hardly anything you can do with that. So we can't do framed buildings. Less concrete is better. We have to figure out load bearing structures. We have to figure out, and then we basically ransacked Laurie Baker's fantastic, there's a Gautam Bhatia book which has an appendix of all of the techniques that Baker used. We basically became authorities on those techniques thanks to this lack of money,
Yeah.
because there was no budget at all. So filler slabs, rat trap bonds, all the whole gamut of whatever Baker had developed. But what was essentially, the saving grace of this is to be closely aware of what is available locally and to be closely aware of what the local masons can do well and to capitalize on that. And we were able to save a lot of money just by being aware of that. So in Trichy, in Tanjavur, in Tarangambadi, all these places where you get very good brick was relatively inexpensive, but very, very good quality. But also a lot of masons we found who were able to do all of those things with brick, which now they didn't have anywhere to deploy. They were doing regular masonry buildings, and suddenly now here was an architect asking them to do a vault, which they knew how to do but had never done, because there were no buildings doing any of that. They were naturally, aware of it. They were able to do it, and we were able to save a lot of money because there's no steel on the roof anymore. It's just all brick. So that was a great learning for us, that if one is sensitive to what is locally available, and more importantly, to know what the local masons are comfortable doing, you're able to make something, much cheaper. So, yeah, I mean, we've always tried to capitalize on that. So we've done buildings with stabilized earth where the local earth is good enough. We don't have to have too much stabilization, too much cement. So we've done projects like that. If there's local stone available, we try to use that in our buildings. But these are all stock answers. I think all architects will give you the same answer. Why do buildings look a certain way, and what do you do with the new building materials that are available? Neil McLaughlin, the Irish architect, again has a wonderful theory about embodied energy and materials, and he says that a lot of the materials that come from farther afield or are predicated on cement or high temperature to produce, like steel, glass, cement. These are materials that we're trying to reduce our dependence on. Not, of course, they're unsustainable and they require a lot of energy to produce and to scurry around the landscape or to ferry across the landscape. But more importantly, because building materials like stone and timber, and these are materials that have embodied in them histories of their making, of the hand that has made them, etc. That when you see a stone building, for some reason, it tells you of its making. It tells you of the history of, this material. Timber the same way, the grain of the timber, the way that it's been used. Immediately you're aware that someone's hand has been there to fashion it a certain way. And that's a poetic way to think about not using embodied energy materials and going towards something that has been naturally manifested, I don't have an answer to the labor thing about the cost thing. We are often pressurized by our clients sometimes to use materials that are more manufactured, aluminum, etc. And we fight the fight, as best as we can.
We've spoken about architecture as a response and your take on multiple things. One of the things that we're curious about, when you practice for a certain point of time and your work has made people feel things and experience things, and of course, you're burdened with this idea of success. Whether you have money in your pockets is not a consideration, but you're burdened with this. I call it burden because it's a weight to carry. At some point of time, it becomes, I don't know whether it does or not. I can't speak for myself. It's an observation. When your identity as somebody who's done good work, or your identity as a brand ambassador for your own self, tends to precede who you are as a person, and you start playing for the brand called
Right.
Bijoy. In such a situation, how does Bijoy the person rein in Bijoy the public persona? And which way does that Bijoy want to go right now?
Um, there's this famous author, Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yes.
She wrote Eat, Pray, Love, no?
Yeah.
And she gave this amazing TED talk, which you've probably seen. So she was 40 years old when Eat, Pray, Love became the New York Times #1 bestseller.
Yeah.
So people would meet her on the street and they would commiserate. They would say, I'm so sorry. This is as good as it gets and you're only 40. You're never going to top this, right? And so the burden, as you call it, of success that she now has to, every book of hers is going to be seen. Is it as good as, the previous one? Like, and how am I ever going to keep up? She said traditionally in the talk, she says the writer basically then wallows in self-pity, takes to drink, and that's the writer's life, right? It's not coming. The magic is gone. So she says the only way that you can live a fruitful life is to think that the creative spark plug, whatever, comes from outside of you. That the great sublime idea hasn't come from you, that it is the genie on a Saturday morning decided because this guy has been showing up every day. Poor guy has been coming and doing riyaz. Chalo, aaj kuch, we'll tell him something, magic. So the genie appears, sits on your shoulder and whispers into your ear. And then you make the amazing plan. It came out of thin air. The moment, and this is Elizabeth saying it, that the moment you think that the great work comes from external source, that it isn't something that because of your great erudition and because you wore the black purple, the turtleneck, that you made that amazing thing, it frees you of that burden of having to create the big thing again. Because all that is in your control is to show up. I came every day. You didn't show up. It's the genie's fault. They've screwed up this whole arrangement. And that's why I don't have a new bestseller. And so you can blame everything outside of you. Blame your clients, blame your budgets, blame the site, blame whatever you want. When you have the great success, same way, don't take credit for it as well. Say that it is because many things happen and that alignment. Always you see, Doshi says this in the film as well, that whenever you're practicing, like I look around me and I only see people who are doing better work than me, people who are doing incredible things. How did they manage it? Like, how did that happen? Why am I not able to do it? And the only response to that is to just keep showing up, that you're just here and hopefully the same guy, the genie who went to George, will come here also. And I will then do something magic, today. And so that frees you of any burden, that you're not then pressured to do anything because, hey, she has this amazing story about the poet who's standing in the field, And this has happened. I'm sure you feel this too. I don't know, Rajesh as well, that you can sense that something's coming, that you're drawing and you can suddenly, you can see some pattern that you didn't see yesterday in the evening, that suddenly something has coalesced.
Yeah.
And so she talks about this poet who's standing in the field and she can feel the words coming in the breeze and she has nothing to write down. So she's running as fast as she can to the house so that she can get a pencil, get a paper before this thing has passed her, because you will forget it in the morning. It's gone. I mean, it's just the most liberating thing to think that this is all because of some other cosmic, that there's some arrangement. And when your time comes, it'll come and it will be nice. But till then, just make sure that you're there, because if you don't have your pencil and paper at hand, if you're not at the table, he will say it and then it's gone, or she will say it and then it's gone. You have no way to, get it back. And so the genie can be anyone. I mean, it can be the client who just by chance said something magic, or you went to site at that particular time in the evening and you saw the way that the sun is falling and it like sparked the idea. Or it can be a colleague in the office who just made a mistake in the model and you say, Arey, that's brilliant. Like, maybe we should do that. So there are clues all over, and so you just have to be careful that you don't miss it. I would like not to take the credit for the things that it has happened, because at that point in time, there was a team in the office who were able to do all the bulwark, the hard work. There was a client who then supported and made it possible. And then we found Prakash or Ramesh or whoever who then was able to deliver that, and then we get all the credit for it, But actually, so many things have to fall in place for value, for 100 hands, like everybody working.
Beautiful, even from a personal point of view, because hey, that also makes. I was, as in how you're talking. I mean, one of the things that by default happens to me is, I think about things that I connect in my own life or things.
Right.
My brain is running, and that's how those 1,000 sparks happen. But that also makes failure a lot more palatable.
Hmm.
It's not that you don't take responsibility for things that haven't gone the way they were supposed to have
Right.
or meant to have, but yeah, I mean, the fact that you're a part of a context,
Yeah.
and the context always context appropriate situations. So, and you are just a pawn in there.
Over the years, over the ages, we've seen some really good buildings changing the fate of a city, like Bilbao has done, or what La Sagrada Familia is doing. Even the hall done by Gary. So, what a good building does to a space, to a city, yes, there is some example available. But does architecture shape the society? Like, for example, Sabha that you have done is now a platform that's available for so many people to come together, present, and there's so many art events happening, so many of these events that happen there that bring people together. So, can good architecture shape the society?
I think more than architecture, I think it is patronage. I think the core question you're asking is about patronage. Bangalore's, I think, unusual in the country because private individuals who've made a lot of money, who've been very successful, have put their money back in the city. I mean, Nandan Nilekani and Wipro have generously helped BIC. We wouldn't have finished BIC without their help. Sabha, of course, Ravi Chandar is behind Sabha, and visionary sort of patronage. Ranga Shankara through, of course, Arundhati Nag's incredible persistence with it, but also a lot of people behind her who've made that. I mean, it's an unbelievable institution in the city. MAP, Abhishek Poddar's fantastic initiative, again, a public gesture. The Science Gallery, Kiran Mazumdar Shaw, all of these people putting money behind institutions where the city now has obfuscated. They've not doing any of what their public commission is. So private individuals have come up to fill that gap, and the city benefits greatly from it. Now, of course, as architects, we are fortunate to have worked on the BIC and Sabha, but also Shoumitro's map, or even Paradigm. You mentioned Paradigm, another great practice coming out of Bangalore. Sandeep, Vimal, and Manoj. They did the new brigade-sponsored Venkatappa Art Gallery renovation. It's very unusual for a city to have so many public institutions that have been funded through private benevolence, and the city benefits greatly from it. Now, architecture, yes, I mean, the BIC and Sabha have really engendered this idea of an open platform for conversation. But that, again, architecture goes only so far. Stewardship is really important, that someone has to take the building and then capitalize on what the building can accommodate to curate events. I mean, that small auditorium at the BIC has had 4 Nobel laureates speak in that hall.
Wow.
It's just unbelievable. And that's not because it's a great hall. It's because of the BIC, right? That they have, through their network, made it a place for conversation, of essential conversation. So that, I think, more than architecture, I think patronage. Architecture will happen. I mean, there will always be talented people who will do nice buildings for the city. But without patronage, you don't get that. I mean, that's the first step. So patronage and stewardship, I think, before and after. Without that, you get nothing.
I wanted to ask you a very open question about us. How did you experience this conversation with us?
I was intimidated at first, particularly because of the lights and the camera and all that.
Yeah.
But it was very, very relaxed. And I think, I've done my fair share of interviews with people. And the main thing that you try to do on an interview is to just have a kind of open conversation. And I really felt that. So thanks for that. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for being on the show.
I think we were also intimidated. I was also very, very intimidated before.
For a while, we didn't know whether we should
Oh,
reach
rubbish.
out to Bijoy Ramachandran. Yeah, we were very intimidated.
Thank you, sir, for doing this with
Sure,
us, for
Anish,
finding
yeah.
time.
No,
And
please. Thank
it
you.
was an absolute honor.
Yeah.
I thoroughly enjoyed it, though I'm going back without asking 40, 50, 60% of my questions.
Right.
But it was absolutely amazing. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks to Keshav and Afnan as well. Yeah.
So if you like what you have heard, do subscribe and share. Thank you.